calm. Act as if nothing bothers you. Not because life has suddenly become gentle, but because you have chosen to become deeper than its noise. There is a silent power hidden inside this posture, a power most people misunderstand. They believe indifference is weakness, that calmness is passivity, that emotional stillness means absence of feeling. But the opposite is closer to truth. To act as if nothing disturbs you is not to feel nothing. It is to feel and still remain sovereign. It is to observe chaos without allowing chaos to enter you. It is to walk through storms without becoming the storm. Imagine for a moment the mind as a vast celestial field, thoughts moving like bodies in space, emotions orbiting like invisible satellites, external events passing like comets, bright, intense, but temporary. Now, remember how Newton observed the universe, not with haste, not with emotional turbulence, but with silent attention. Isaac Newton did not control gravity, yet he understood its law, and in understanding, he gained mastery of interpretation. The same applies to inner life. You may not control what happens around you, but you can understand the forces acting within you. And understanding dissolves unnecessary suffering. Act as if everything around you were in silence, even when the world is screaming. Because the world will scream. It always has. Judgments will emerge from those who fear your direction. Criticism will arise from those who abandoned their own. Noise is inevitable, but internal amplification is optional. A silent mind does not mean absence of sound outside. It means absence of echo inside, as if judgments could find no shelter in your mind. Think about this carefully. Criticism only survives where it is hosted. An insult needs internal agreement to wound. A doubt needs internal space to grow. Without mental hospitality, negativity starves. So your task is not to silence others, but to refuse them psychological residence. Act as if criticism had no strength to stop you, not because criticism is always false, but because its power depends on your interpretation. Some words are feedback, others are projection. Wisdom lies in discernment. Take what refines you, release what was never yours. Act as if pain were only a visitor and not your home. Pain arrives in every life. Loss, disappointment, betrayal, uncertainty. But permanence is a decision the mind makes. You can experience pain without building identity around it. You can feel grief without constructing residence inside sorrow. Visitors come, stay briefly, and leave. Homes are maintained, decorated, revisited. Choose carefully what you turn into psychological residence. Act as if your peace were shielded by a higher force, because in many ways it is. Peace is not fragile as people assume. It is not easily broken by circumstance. It is broken by identification. The moment you fuse your identity with external turbulence, peace dissolves. But when you observe life from inner distance, peace stabilizes. Have you ever asked yourself what the true power of a silent mind is? Not the silence of apathy, but the silence of strength.
There is a silence born from exhaustion and another born from mastery. The first withdraws because it cannot cope. The second observes because it understands. That peace that does not depend on circumstances, that is the rarest form of psychological wealth. Because circumstances fluctuate endlessly. If your stability depends on them, your peace becomes seasonal. But if peace originates internally, life loses its power to destabilize you. This is absolute mastery. And mastery always begins with thought. You learn to control what you think, what you feel, and what you decide. Not through suppression, but through conscious redirection. Thoughts arise automatically, but attention decides which ones take root. Emotion emerges spontaneously, but interpretation decides its duration. Decision ultimately defines trajectory. Many thinkers through time recognized this inner sovereignty. Napoleon Hill once observed that the only absolute control we possess is control over our own mind. And though his language belonged to another era, the psychological truth remains intact. Whoever masters thought gradually masters life, because life, as experienced, is filtered through perception. Two individuals can inhabit the same external reality, yet live entirely different inner worlds. One feels oppressed, the other feels challenged. One sees limitation, the other sees construction. Circumstance did not change, interpretation did. Ancient scripture echoed the same observation. As a man thinks in his soul, so is he. Not metaphorically, structurally. Identity crystallizes around dominant thought patterns. What you rehearse internally, you become externally. What you think in silence, life expresses in form. And what you feel deeply, reality begins to organize around. This is not mysticism, it is psychological architecture. True strength, therefore, is not found in shouting louder, nor in answering every offense, nor in proving your worth repeatedly to those committed to misunderstanding you. True strength is restraint, selective response, measured energy distribution. Because every reaction is expenditure, and those who react to everything eventually weaken. But those who respond only where necessary consolidate power. There is dignity in composure, authority in calmness, an almost gravitational presence in those who refuse emotional chaos. Newton taught that massive bodies bend the space around them. In human terms, deep minds bend emotional environments. Rooms quiet when they enter. Conflict softens. Noise loses dominance. Not through force, but through presence. So within these 30 days of transformation, cultivate inner gravity. Do not rush to prove. Do not hurry to defend. Stand, observe, decide slowly. You will notice something profound emerging. Situations that once consumed your energy now pass without impact. Voices that once destabilized you lose relevance. Because your center of reference has shifted. You are no longer reacting from insecurity, but responding from structure. And structure, once built, sustains itself. This is where part 1 settles into stillness, not as an ending, but as an inner stabilization point. because once the mind learns silence, the rest of transformation becomes not forced, but natural.
Once the mind learns silence, something irreversible begins to unfold within the individual. It does not happen suddenly. There is no dramatic rupture, no external ceremony announcing transformation. Instead, it emerges quietly, almost imperceptibly, like dawn replacing night without asking permission. You begin to notice that situations which once consumed your emotional energy now pass through you without disturbance. Voices that once echoed loudly in your inner world lose their amplification. Conflicts that once demanded reaction no longer command urgency. This is not indifference. It is internal reorganization. It is the moment when psychological gravity begins to stabilize. Newton observed that massive bodies influence everything around them through invisible force, not through noise, not through visible effort, but through silent pull. In the same way, when the human mind gains internal mass, emotional discipline, clarity of thought, anchored identity, it begins to influence life differently. Circumstances still occur, challenges still arise, but their ability to destabilize you weakens because your center no longer depends on them. You are no longer orbiting chaos. Chaos begins orbiting you. This transition marks the birth of psychological authority, and authority always begins with identity, because behavior alone cannot sustain transformation. Habits may start change, but identity sustains it. If you still see yourself as fragile, you will eventually return to fragility. If you still perceive yourself as reactive, reactions will reclaim you. So within this period of inner construction, you must deliberately reshape self-perception, not arrogantly, not through fantasy, but through conscious alignment. You begin asking quieter, deeper questions. Who am I becoming through my daily thoughts? What emotional posture am I rehearsing? What internal narrative am I strengthening each morning? Because identity is not discovered accidentally. It is constructed through repetition of thought and decision. Newton did not become the architect of physical laws overnight. His mind was trained in observation, patience, relentless contemplation. He allowed questions to mature internally before seeking answers externally. And that same contemplative discipline applies to personal evolution. You must allow your new identity to mature internally before expecting external validation. For many individuals, the greatest obstacle to growth is impatience. They want visible change before internal stabilization, recognition before structure, results before psychological readiness. But nature does not operate this way. Seeds root invisibly before they rise visibly, and identities solidify internally before they express externally. So patience becomes essential. Not passive patience, but disciplined patience. You continue practicing silence even when provoked. You continue choosing composure even when misunderstood. You continue building inner order even when outer life still appears unchanged. Because you understand something most overlook. External reality lags behind internal transformation. Life reflects, but with delay. As this patience deepens, another shift begins to occur: emotional economy. You become selective about where you invest energy. You no longer argue to prove intelligence. You no longer react to validate ego. You no longer explain yourself to those committed to misinterpretation, not because you feel superior, but because you value conservation. Energy, once scattered, begins consolidating, and consolidated energy becomes power.
Newton's laws remind us that motion requires force, but sustained motion requires direction. Many people expend force daily, yet move nowhere. Why? Because their energy disperses across trivial conflicts, digital distractions, emotional entanglements, unnecessary comparison. But once emotional economy develops, force becomes focused, and focused force alters trajectory. You begin to notice increased mental clarity. Decisions become cleaner. Priorities reorganize. You feel less pulled by external urgency and more guided by internal direction. This leads naturally into purpose, not the loud, performative purpose displayed publicly, but the silent, stabilizing purpose felt privately. Purpose does not need audience, it needs sincerity. It answers a simple but transformative question. Why am I building my life the way I am? Without this axis, discipline weakens, effort feels mechanical, sacrifice feels heavy. But when purpose is present, effort reorganizes emotionally. Fatigue gains meaning, delay becomes tolerable, obstacles become instructional rather than discouraging. You are no longer merely enduring life, you are constructing something through it. And construction always demands pruning. You cannot expand while carrying expired psychological weight. So within these 30 days, detachment becomes structural necessity. You release conversations that drain clarity. You distance from environments that normalize stagnation. You abandon habits that contradict your emerging identity, not with hostility, but with firmness. Newton understood that bodies in motion follow paths determined by force and resistance. In human terms, your trajectory is shaped by influence and friction. If you remain surrounded by friction that opposes your growth, progress slows. If you reduce resistance, acceleration becomes natural. So you begin simplifying life, reducing noise, organizing time, creating mental space where reflection can exist uninterrupted. And within that space, discipline matures further. You begin structuring your mornings intentionally, arising before urgency claims your attention, entering silence before entering obligation. You read thoughts that expand perspective, write intentions that direct behavior, act before distraction dissolves clarity, not as performance, but as internal alignment. Because mornings set psychological momentum, and momentum shapes the day's emotional architecture. You also refine emotional restraint. You pause before reacting, observe before concluding, breathe before speaking. Each moment of restraint strengthening sovereignty over impulse, because the individual who governs reaction governs outcome. Life loses leverage over those who refuse unconscious response. And slowly, almost invisibly, self-trust begins to rebuild. You trust your decisions more, your patience more, your composure more, because you have evidence, lived evidence of your evolving structure. This self-trust is critical. Without it, discipline feels forced. With it, discipline feels natural, because you are no longer acting against yourself, but in alignment with who you are becoming. And here, transformation reaches one of its most profound thresholds. You realize that peace, once practiced as effort, has become default posture. Calmness is no longer something you attempt, it is something you inhabit. You walk differently, speak with measured tone, respond without urgency. There is gravity in your presence, not imposed, but emanated. Like celestial bodies influencing space through silent mass, your inner stillness begins influencing environments around you. Conflicts soften near you. Conversations stabilize. Your composure recalibrates emotional climates without force. This is psychological gravitation, and it cannot be faked. It emerges only from authentic inner order. Now, as these 30 days approach symbolic completion, you understand something essential. Transformation was never about becoming someone else. It was about removing internal chaos that obscured who you already were capable of being. Silence revealed clarity, restraint revealed strength, discipline revealed direction, and patience revealed inevitability. Because once inner architecture stabilizes, external change ceases to feel miraculous. It feels proportional, natural, aligned. Newton revealed that every action generates reaction, and in these days you applied internal action, focused thought, measured emotion, deliberate behavior. So reaction inevitably began to unfold in your reality, not always dramatically, but structurally.